Hello, Famous and Gravy listeners. Michael Osborne here. Okay, so I am popping on today with a bit of a different episode. I want to give an update about where the show's at, and then I want to share a conversation I had with a woman named Arielle Nissenblatt. She is a podcast Hall of Fame professional. When I say Hall of Fame, that's actually true. She was recently inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame. I think she's the youngest inductee. I'll say more about my conversation with Arielle in a second, but first, I wanted to give an update. So about a month ago, I put the show on pause, hoping for some feedback. I did not expect to hear from so many people. I have gotten such a warm response with really thoughtful notes and people making time for one-on-one conversations. It's been awesome and humbling. And honestly, I'm really excited about where things are at. I've made a few decisions about Famous and Gravy, and if you listen to the last episode, I shared some of my, ruminations on what I'm going to do. One decision I've made, I'm not changing the name. I know it's a confusing name, but people love it. I love it. I'm kind of invested, and call me stubborn, it's going to stay Famous and Gravy. I am definitely going to bring the show back in the coming months. There's really no question in my mind, but I'm going to make some adjustments to the script, and I really want to think about how people are being introduced to the show. One thing that's come through really clearly in the conversations I've had since pausing the show is that some listeners are looking for more ways to connect, and not just with the show, but really with each other. I heard somebody say recently, you need to think of your podcast as being on a stage. It's a theater, but a theater has a backstage and a theater also has a lobby. I feel like I've built the stage for Famous and Gravy, and I want to make a few prop adjustments, but I haven't really built a backstage, and I really haven't built a lobby. I don't know how I'm going to do that. That's one of the things I'm absolutely thinking about right now is how can I give people more opportunities to connect and more access to anything that may be interesting or valuable to them about the show. That's where I'm at, and that's actually a pretty good segue to my conversation today with Arielle Nissenblatt. So Arielle is the head of community and content at Pinwheel, where she does a whole bunch of podcast strategy work. I know her because she's the founder of something called Earbuds Podcast Collective. This is a long-running newsletter, and it curates podcast recommendations. Arielle, honestly, is ubiquitous. She has a real talent for being everywhere, but more than anything else, she is a champion of podcasts, and especially podcast hosts. Not just a champion. She is really out there creating opportunity, offering honest feedback. And she put a call out not too long ago saying, hey, I am open to guesting on a show if anybody wants me to do an audit. And I thought, you know what? Famous and Gravy's on pause. There's very few people in the world who I think could offer better step back advice. And so I sent a note to Arielle saying, hey, I'd love to have you on Famous and Gravy. Would you listen to a few episodes and come on the show? So that's what we did. This is definitely a backstage conversation, but I thought it might be interesting to you to learn more about how I think about the show, how it works, and maybe even what it could become, because I'm not done. I am going to bring Famous and Gravy back, and I want it to be even better when I do. So one more thing before I get to the conversation with Arielle. If you are open to giving more feedback on email or on listener calls, I've still got a bunch of these scheduled, and Lord knows I am not done trying to make improvements. But especially if you have thoughts on this sort of, what does the backstage look like, and then what does the lobby look like? How do I build a space for people to participate in the show and feel involved? Okay, I'm going to take a break for a few ads, and then we will get to my conversation with Arielle.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
If you want me to lead, my first question is, what do you think?
I do want you to lead, but I was wondering, okay, so behind the scenes for listeners, let's start with this. You mentioned in your episode about the survey, you do the pontificating. Am I leaving something on the table by not doing video? Can you talk me through that?
Yeah,
Give me your, I definitely think I should do video, and then I don't want to do video at all.
Yeah.
Like, what are the reasons for both?
Okay. So I certainly came to podcasting as an audio first person. There is something pure to me about an audio exclusive experience, in that I believe that people come to it with a lot less judgment and a lot more grace, that when we are given visuals, it can be a distraction from the main experience. That is such a purist point of view, and I've tried to loosen my rigidity around that. So that's one consideration. The other, more practical, is that I do quite a bit of editing on the show, that we are typically recording for between an hour and a half to sometimes 2 hours, and trying to edit it down to, roughly an hour runtime. And the practical considerations of that editing have always sort of frustrated me to do that. It's either my time or a producer's time. Those are the two big things in a way. That's a sort of long-form video consideration. With infinite money and with infinite time, sure, I'd be open to it, but it hasn't felt like a priority. I'm also not naive to all the opportunities and growth on YouTube. I mean, you'd have to be, head in the sand to not realize the opportunity there. So even on the short form video side, video clips, I mean, I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on TikTok right now, and I've always thought that there may be an opportunity to do short form content in a way that would attract people to the show. I mean, the segments and categories of the podcast feel like they lend themselves to that.
They're perfect for it.
But I've never had a great commitment to what short form video would be. So those are the sort of top things on my mind. And I do realize that I am out there playing with one arm tied behind my back with some of my attitudes around video.
I think that's okay.
I mean, during this pause, I think I've actually become a little bit more at peace with, I might never do long form video. It's not what brought me to this. It's not what I care about. And I feel like I'm faking it and compromising something. And I
think a lot of people are coming to that realization that, this has been happening forever. People have been talking about videos in earnest since 2022.
Yeah.
I don't know why it just kind of seems like it made headlines last year. I created a personality quiz in August that was like, do you need to add video to your podcast? And you remember personality quizzes in like magazines. It would be a question and then it would have an arrow to another part. So the first question is, do you want to record video? And if the answer is no, then okay, you made it to the bottom of the quiz and you don't have to record video. Because first and foremost, do you want to do it?
I don't. I mean, I don't. I do feel like I'm willing to consider it in some ways, and I'm trying to loosen my, stance on it.
Me too.
Yeah.
And my stance has definitely evolved over the years. I used to say, like, if my friends said, oh, I watched a podcast, I'd be like, no, you didn't. And then I'm like, why am I saying that?
Yeah.
Who am I to dictate how you talk about the media that you consume? Especially because I'm this insider in the podcast space. I'm definitely not the norm. But over time, I've learned that a lot constitutes a show, entertainment. There are multiple distribution angles to how people might discover you. You mentioned a few minutes ago, you said something like, I might be leaving a lot on the table if by not doing video. And my thought is, just because you start a YouTube channel also doesn't mean that you're gonna get an audience. I know plenty of people who have pivoted to video and really invested in that and bought the equipment, and they're paying different people to edit different parts so that now they have all these things that are clippable, and they're still not doing that well on YouTube. It's not a guarantee.
Yeah. Yeah.
And ironically, what we just said is extremely clippable. And I think is a pretty good encapsulation of the philosophy of why it is that you do what you do with audio and the intimacy of that and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in 2026, I think you're going to see more and more people double down on, I do an audio podcast. Sure, I might put out promo clips, but I have zero desire to go and rent a studio and require all my guests to be in person. And you don't have to do that in order to have a dedicated fan base that will maybe eventually translate to ad dollars.
Yeah.
You can still make money. You can still have a dedicated fan base if you do audio only. And I think it'll even behoove a bunch of people to, draw a line in the sand and say, I'm an audio only podcast.
Honestly, I'm sort of ready to be on that line in the sand with no, judgment or commentary about what video is.
It's right for some people.
It's right for some people. It's not right for others. I mean, actually, this is a segue to other bigger questions because, as I've observed you and I pay attention to what you have to say. I see clips. I listen to you on podcasts. We have conversations at conferences and that kind of thing. What's interesting is that I know you're a big champion of newsletters, and I've been sort of flirting with that. And it's funny because it's like, do I go video media, YouTube and social clips on Instagram and TikTok, or do I think about something that's more text-based read? And part of why I like audio is that I do feel like it's closer to a literary reading experience. It's the theater of the mind. Vocabulary matters in an audio-only experience, whereas video is more passive to me and not quite as engaging or sticky. So I have been flirting with a newsletter idea. It's sort of the same questions. What could I say, that's related to the concept of the show that would have sort of aligned and adjacent but distinct value in a newsletter?
Yes, thank you. That's my number one point. You might have read or seen me post about this kind of thing, but when you're formulating a newsletter to go along with a podcast, it definitely needs to be distinct, because if it's just a copy of each episode, it's not adding anything to anyone. Also, it allows you to play around with different entry points. If somebody discovers you via a newsletter, maybe it's called Famous and Gravy, maybe it's called like
Life Lessons from Dead Celebrities was one I thought about. Yeah,
I like that. Then somebody discovers you from those search terms, likes what you're writing, and then maybe there's a plug for a recent episode. They go and check out that recent episode. Maybe still the primary way that they interact with you is through the newsletter, and then every once in a while, one of your episodes.
Yeah.
And then the opposite happens with somebody who discovered you through the podcast, and then maybe you make a plug for something, or they see in the show notes of your episode that you now have a newsletter, and maybe that's a good way of keeping up with like going if you're doing a live show in the future, or if you are seeking out people to add voice notes to your quiz at the beginning of each episode. There's multiple ways for things to overlap within the two, but I do think the entry point needs to be distinct. And most of all, the reason I advocate so much for newsletters is because it's just important to be capturing the email addresses of the people that you're trying to be in touch with, because you don't inherently get that from the podcast feed.
This is one place where I've been very lucky. I get a lot more listener email than I've ever gotten on any other show I've worked on before. Part of that is because there's this invitation to take the quiz, and so people write in and do that. Since pausing production...
Wait, can you walk me through how the quiz works? Because this was one of my notes.
Sure.
So I think maybe some newer listeners might not be aware of the quiz, because to me, the way it works is, the episode starts with, here's the quiz. You're going to guess today's dead celebrity. Obviously, the listeners already know what that dead celebrity, who that is, because of the name of the show, which is fine. But
that was not always the case. And there's a question about that. So we used to withhold the name of the dead celebrity. Now it's in parentheses. There was a school of thought that we were hurting ourselves in terms of SEO, in terms of the dead celebrity having a lot of SEO juice and not being in the title. So we started putting it in, which of course spoiled it, which was sort of unfortunate. At times I've thought about, okay, what if I left it not available for a week and then updated the title a week later? And that's something I may do, because early on people did enjoy playing the quiz, but it had that penalty of less, SEO. I don't think that was your question, but that's a little bit of how that came to be.
No, that's definitely helpful to know. And episode naming conventions is something that I think about a lot. Mm-hmm. And I do think you are missing something by not having it. This is a show with a long tail. It's evergreen content. These people are dead. They will continue to be dead. Therefore, maybe it is okay if later on you change the episode titles.
Yeah, there's nothing urgent or like, it's today's and you're going to miss it if it's a week. Right. And certainly the data suggests people come upon the show and often binge the back catalog. So I think that there is kind of, best of both worlds. It may penalize the immediate downloads on day of release, so what? And I'm not even...
I honestly, that might be a good thing, because it...
Why not?
Advertisers are always asking, how many downloads do you get in 30 days or 60 days or whatever?
Right.
honestly, if you're getting a boost later on, that's even better because you're probably still going to get the majority of your listeners in the first 30 days, but people are going to keep discovering.
It's more like 40% on any given release cycle is back catalog when I look at the monthly numbers, which feels like a high number. I don't have points of comparison on that, but my theory is that the number one reason anybody ever clicks into this show ever is because they have a pre-existing interest in some celebrity, right? That you are Johnny
I did hear you say that.
Yeah, and that, you know, the ideal journey for the sort of dedicated fan is they come because they're interested in Johnny Cash or Joan Rivers or Tina Turner or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And they try a couple episodes, and by episode 3 or 4, a parasocial relationship has begun to emerge where...
And with you, sure, but also with the different segments.
Correct.
They're interested in how you're going to respond, how you're going to answer this question for this celebrity.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. And so I think over time it becomes more about the format and the hosts.
I will say that when I was listening to a few episodes in order to come to this conversation, I asked you ahead of time for your favorite episode or one that you really think encapsulates the vibe of the show, the goals of the show. One that you didn't necessarily think did that as well. And then I chose a few others.
Okay.
And this morning, actually, I was choosing one more to listen to before we spoke. And at first I was scrolling and I was like, you know, I don't really care about that person. I don't really know that person. And I was like, you know what? I'm actually, something switched in my brain. And I was like, I am actually curious about how he's going to approach this topic about this person. He specifically, Michael Osborne, you know, so that did change for me. I did come back for you eventually, not the celebrity.
I'm at the edge of my seat of what the last one you listened to.
Kobe.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Some things to navigate in that episode.
Yeah. It was awesome.
You thought it was good?
They're all great.
Okay.
Would you like me to get into some of the specifics of my...
I think so. I want to make sure we save some time to talk about the newsletter short video clip. Like if I had to make a choice there, because I think as somebody who is a champion of newsletters, what I hear from listeners in surveys and focus group calls, you know, in sort of casual conversations is they appreciate the blend of entertainment and self-reflection. That it's fun, but also meaningful. That feels like fertile territory for a newsletter. And I feel like there's ideas that are often left on the table that maybe I don't get to in the course of the conversation. So that's one area where I might think about how a newsletter could complement an episode.
So there are different types of newsletters, obviously. The easiest one to make is a roundup. It's, you know, here are the segments that we covered in the podcast, and here's maybe a little bit more reflection on each one. Then there's where you could bring in other sources. You know, if your most recent episode is about, let's say, Anthony Bourdain, maybe you think about other celebrities who are dead or alive or whatever, who are in the food space. Yeah. And maybe you use that as a way to just add context. And then another option, and these are just like off the top of my head, another option is for you to go the more reflective route where you could, you know, with the Anthony Bourdain, you and Alice talked a lot about recovery. So maybe you could go into the recovery side of things. And there's probably something personal in each of the episodes that you could pull out and do more of an essay type reflection on, which is more of the Substack, quote unquote, way of going about things. I'm on Substack for a number of my newsletters, and I notice that people tend to at least start their newsletter on Substack with the idea that it's going to be like a place for them to reflect. My newsletters are more roundup style. I use them mostly for the podcast industry. Sometimes I'll write a little bit more about philosophy behind podcast marketing, but I'll always make it very concrete and actionable. But I do think you would need to either decide to be one type of newsletter or leave yourself open to the possibility of there being different types. But there would always need to be some sort of, like, I'm a big fan of transparency. So something at the top of the newsletter that's like, of each issue of the newsletter that's like,
this is this type or something. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I like that. I mean, I've been applying a similar sort of filter or guiding light for how I'm thinking about upcoming episodes, because I'm fairly confident I'm going to bring the show back. This is a reflection pause. This is not a indefinite hiatus, I don't think.
No, it's so much fun.
Yeah.
I definitely think you should bring it back.
Yeah, and the response I've gotten has been more than I expected. There's clearly a fan base that, like, this pause has prompted, you know, come out of the woodwork, and it's been awesome. And it's gone right to my head.
Good, as it should, as it should. Because look, it's a history show that does more than, like, to me, it's a history show because I listen to a lot of history podcasts.
Yeah.
These people are in the past. And it's kind of a history show with what can we learn? Actually, there's a new show on Apple Podcasts being featured right now on the new shows tab. And it sort of reminds me of what your show does, but obviously you're the OG. It's called Life Lessons from History.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a good show.
It's a good show, and it makes me think almost, and I know you've probably gotten this feedback before, it might be worth a keyword shift or a potential name change of like life lessons from dead celebrities.
Yeah. Yes. This is another question that is hovering,
I love Famous and Gravy. It is visceral. It's fun, but I don't know what it comes from.
No, and I don't define it in the script. I don't define it
Right.
in the title. I don't define it in the artwork. And a confused mind always says no.
And you don't always have to,
Yeah.
right? Like not every show. Some shows have ambiguous titles and we love them anyway. We latch onto them. We don't even question it sometimes. I think while you're at this growth stage, at this potential shifting stage, it might be worth it to at least play around with a new name.
I mean, for what it's worth, I've tried different ideas. We could call the show "Would You Want This Life," and that would tell you what it's.
I think you need dead celebrities in there.
Yeah.
I know it's intense.
Where it is and it's very easily misread. It's almost like we are dunking on these there, but for the grace of God, go I.
We could come up with something softer.
If you think so, I have tried, Arielle, and I have not gotten there. And I'd also say there's another practical consideration of just the IP of it all. I've got an LLC, I've got a website, I've got 126 episodes with this title and this artwork, and I know there's a stubbornness. I can hear it in my own.
No, you're making good points, but I think there's a middle ground. Right now, it is just Famous and Gravy. What about a colon and then a few keywords after that?
On the artwork in the title everywhere?
No, just in the title. Artwork stays as is.
Okay.
So it would just be Famous and Gravy.
Life lessons from dead celebrities or something like that. Okay.
Yeah. So then when people are searching celebrity.
Okay. This is an idea I'm very warm to, and one I would almost change immediately. Okay.
And it's not one that you have to announce.
Yeah. Okay. Super helpful. Let's go back to
newsletter.
Yeah. One thing I was going to say is that I've come to a realization that there's kind of two big things that might underlie any given episode. Either one, it's a sort of you're wrong about thing where your memory of this person is incomplete, is not fully fleshed out. There's stuff about them you don't know that may change your point of view. Or you didn't know who this person was in the first place, and it's worth bringing their memory back and talking about them now because there's more legacy, more interesting, impact or something. And I feel like it's the same idea with this newsletter. It ought to be a roundup or a reflection or some third or fourth category where it's almost titled that way of this is this kind of newsletter, but that I give myself a few guiding headlines to elaborate upon with whatever feels right for this episode.
Yeah, maybe it's like the naming convention of the issues for the newsletter is like Anthony Bourdain wasn't actually blank.
Yeah.
Kobe Bryant wasn't actually blank.
Yeah. Or it is worth remembering, I don't know, Kurt Vonnegut because you forgot about him. Or he's not super obscure. But
what you didn't know about Kurt Vonnegut.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like whittling down the kind of 2 or 3 bag of prompts for a newsletter would give me sufficient direction to write.
Yeah. And not to plug my stuff, but I have a free resource where I have like a bunch of downloadable things of how to name your show, how to come up with the concept of it.
Okay.
So I'll send that to you.
Please do. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I got to say, I really love this idea. I kind of even like the discipline of it. And you and I were talking before the recording about, I'm going to be teaching this class with the SALT Institute. I'm actually even thinking about kind of prototyping the newsletter with my students.
I love the idea of while you're on this break, you still love keeping up your knowledge, keeping up your creativity, and also playing around with the fact that there's multiple entry points for a show nowadays. And this is just part of your show's ecosystem. And eventually, if we're talking about monetization, it's more impressions for you to play around with, to report on, and for trades with other podcasts or other newsletters, you now have this to offer.
Yeah. Okay. Boy, that's great. Okay. I don't want to be steering things too much. I mean, before you hopped on the call and were like, what should I tell Michael to help him out? What were the kind of top line things you were thinking about?
Well, first, let me put an umbrella over what I'm going to share.
Okay.
Some of the suggestions that I have, or suggestions or thoughts or questions that I have for you, are going to ask you to think about how you set things up and maybe cause you to, you're in this, you've been in this. So I might have come to the show with the perspective of somebody who isn't as tied in. I've listened before, I've listened in the past, and I've listened now. And I think that some of my questions might cause you to say, okay, it's interesting that people think this about the show, So maybe that'll be helpful. Some of the suggestions are going to be concrete, like we've already given a few.
Mm-hmm.
And then some I think you might want to think about before potentially applying them, or maybe ask for some other feedback. So let me jump in with a concrete one. I was listening to the Kobe episode, as I mentioned.
Okay.
And at the top of that episode, there's a voice that comes in and says, if you want to participate in the quiz, you can email this email address. So my first question there is, who is that voice? And why do you not keep that call to action in for all of the episodes?
It should be. It's meant to have been. The script has evolved, so I'm not sure. And it's now standard practice on every episode to say, this is Famous and Gravy, biographies from a different point of view. If you want to participate in the quiz, email us.
Oh, yeah. And just to go back very quickly, how does the quiz work? So people email, they say, I want to be part of the quiz?
Yes.
And then what?
So it was inspired by Wait, Don't Tell Me and Heavyweight. I always liked how...
Jackie.
Yeah, how he's messing with Jackie. And
I actually thought about doing an article on like the top 10 cold opens with Jackie.
Yes.
Anyway,
the
continue.
best. So, I mean, the quiz, like a lot of things, have evolved since we started it. There was a woman who I'm friends with who's got a funny voice, and I used to call her up and said, I got a quiz for you. But then we were like, we should get other voices in here. And then it became a pipeline for listener conversations.
So do you get on the phone with them?
Yeah, I'll do.
That's a lot of work, man.
It's not that much, and it's worth it. For me.
I mean, yes, you're getting direct feedback from your listeners.
That's why it's worth it. That little hack where it's like, hey, now that I got you for the quiz, how'd you find the show?
How'd you find us?
How'd you describe it to your friends? What can I do
classic
better?
Tom Webster from
I
Sounds
use
Profitabilism.
exactly his 5 questions.
Yes, those are the best 5 questions.
Those are the best 5 questions.
From an article called What We Talk About When We Talk About Podcasting. I talk about it all the time.
Yes. So that alone is worth its weight in gold.
Yeah. It's an excuse for you.
This is the first show where I've ever had that kind of one-on-one chance conversation with organic audience.
Yeah. Okay. So that voice.
That voice is the guest host.
Got it. Oh, it's always the guest host.
It's always the guest host now. Something that I think I told you about in the email that, longtime listeners know, not everybody does. The show was Amit Kapoor and me up to about the Harold Ramis episode. Amit's had to step away from the show. I have invited guest hosts on. One of the things I'm doing during this pause is actually recording one-on-ones with guest hosts saying, what are you getting out of it? What can I do better? Did you feel teed up for success? And that kind of thing.
Amazing.
But so
I have a suggestion on that.
Okay. I'd love to hear that actually, because this is that one's been real top of mind for me.
I bet. And okay, my thought is it's a lot of work for you. You mentioned before the show in general. I imagine it is also difficult for you, mostly with the guest host, because sometimes they'll be listeners of the show. Sometimes they are semi-familiar with the show. Are they ever people who have never really listened to the show and you say, like, I want you to be a guest host?
No, in fact, almost none of those things are true. In that it's almost all friends. It's friends.
Oh, amazing.
And the show for me, the philosophy has always been that pop culture is common ground, that transcends religion, it transcends politics. It's where we can talk and connect. And the ethos of friendship is woven into Famous and Gravy for me, that it's a designed conversation between friends. And so I have a guest host template that kind of walks them through the philosophy and structure of it. One thing I've heard from all of them is that the structure is a relief. That, some of them have guessed on other podcasts. They kind of know exactly how to slot in because they have to answer the question, One Love, Man in the Mirror, Coffee, Cocktail, Cannabis, whatever it may be. And so that there's a sort of like pressure release in all that signposting and all that structure.
Yes, I love that. So you may not love this suggestion, but as a way of taking the burden off of the guest host to come up with the 5, there's a lot of segments that you have.
Yeah, it's all segments.
And it may be harder work for you to do all the back and forth, making sure they understand how to answer all the segments. So there's a pretty popular podcast format out there where it's one co-host explaining to the other co-host, reacting to it. Maybe you give some leading questions.
Michael Hobbs kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly the example I was going to give. So if you wanted to, maybe in your I'm coming back to the show after your hiatus, try out some different formats. Maybe you give them an outline that's a little bit less structured and you go through all of the different segments that you have. Maybe you cut out a few of those segments. I'll have some ideas for you on that soon. That just make it a stripped down version that still has a lot of your reflections in it. You can still get more reflections from your guest, but the goal is ultimately to give you less work on this side of things, but basically it's giving you more of a format to get more guest hosts.
Interesting.
And maybe those guest hosts could be people from different areas that maybe they're your friends, but also maybe they're like strategic potential partners that you want to be a guest on their show.
Yeah.
It just allows you a little bit more flexibility in your format, I think. It doesn't have to be for every episode.
Yeah. Okay. I will say, just it's hard to not react. And I hope this doesn't sound defensive, but I guess the truth of the matter is the structure and format make things easy. Really,
I know
really
that's why I
kind of easy for everybody in a way. It surprisingly lessens the burden of prep and of explaining, what you're supposed to do, but it also inhibits cross-promotion and guest hosts outside the box because, which is, I think, the consideration that you're, forcing me to think about.
I'm thinking about the growth element and how you might be able to strategically call in some people that might...
You want it to be an easy lift for them to pop on my show. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think if that is the goal, then that alone is absolutely worth considering, whether that's a question of format and structure or alternative bonus episodes. As long as it feels like a Famous and Gravy episode, I don't think I have to go to great lengths to over-explain some deviation from the normal format. All right, sounds like you got some opinions on the categories themselves.
Yes, I do. Not even the categories. I love the categories, but first of all, I would love at the top of the show some sort of rundown of the categories and then an acknowledgement once you get to the categories. We're moving on now to our next section or segment or whatever. But I think at the top, especially for people who are coming to the show for the first time or who are, confused by exactly what each segment is going to do.
Yeah.
I think it would help us to say, as always on the show, we're going to hit the following segments in order to fully flush out the life of our dead celebrity.
I think that's a really good point of advice. I think I would probably go for a kind of compromise solution there in that one way to think about Famous and Gravy is that each of the segments probes the question, what can we learn about ourselves? And even the thought experiment, would you want that life, is meant to be just that, a thought experiment. And so would you want their money? Would you want their love life? Would you want their self-reflection? Would you want their wisdom? Would you want their vibes? So I think that there is a way of saying, our show is a gamified biography where we use categories and segments.
Do you say that?
No, I should.
You should.
Yeah.
You should play around with all of that.
Yeah. I think that there's a succinct way to do it. I don't want to be like taking 15 minutes to explain the show, but I do understand the sort of disorientation you're describing for a first-time listener of like, what the hell's happening on this podcast?
I think it's like the quiz starts, you introduce the guest, what's your relationship to the topic or to this person, and then essentially explaining to the guest co-host, as always, here are the segments. But for those just joining us, like sometimes you can acknowledge that people are coming to you for the first time. Sometimes you can say, if you've been here for a while, here's why these categories came about.
It's a great piece of advice. I mean, one of the things that happens when you build a listenership is you forget that there's always somebody coming in for the first time.
I mentioned this up top, right? Like I am fresh to this.
Yeah. Okay. Great tip. I love that.
There's that. And then also some of the categories. First of all, I don't understand the Big Lebowski one. It could be an age thing. I don't know the movie super well. So even I like the idea of it. I'm sure some people love it. They know the Big Lebowski. They love the sound bite that you play. But what if we every once in a while throw in an explanatory comma? Here's why it's called the Big Lebowski.
Yeah. I've heard some feedback about that particular category, and I think it's one worth putting under a microscope, maybe renaming or maybe explaining more, one or the other.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit of a wild card of like, I just want to remind you of some fun pop culture touch point that you probably forgot about, and it's like a choose your own adventure.
Say that.
Yeah, that's probably the way to describe it. Because you're right, it is a movie that has a cult following, not everybody's in on, and it kind of... it can leave people feeling on the outside of something where I want to bring everybody in,
Right.
So I think that's a good one to look at.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. More on the segments. Yeah, I mean, this is also the kind of thing that when you're looking for partnerships in the future, those are brandable. Here's our obit section sponsored by, I don't know, the New York Times. No, just kidding. But like, you never know.
Death, yeah. No, actually that.
A funeral home. Oh,
yeah.
I bet they would pay because like they randomly do very well, funeral homes.
That's an interesting thought. I actually have some people I know who have some experience in that industry.
Actually, there's a podcast called Death And. It's new.
Okay.
Ish. The host is a guy named Victor M. Sweeney. He's a mortician and he prepares bodies for burial. And that could just be a cool cross promo.
So can we talk about that for just one beat? I've always thought I've had a kind of funny relationship with death as a concept because I don't think we are a deathy show.
I don't think so either.
But there are people who find us through that route.
But you could do it as a funny tie-in.
Yeah, no. And I'm comfortable with that. This is more about the philosophy of the show that I'm interested to hear your thoughts on. I don't know if the show is cathartic in any way, shape, or form. Celebrities are people we have parasocial relationships with. And, sometimes there are some examples, Anthony Bourdain, Philip Seymour Hoffman, we haven't done a Robin Williams episode, but where their memory is still painful to all of us. And I feel like the show can be cathartic, but that's not its value proposition. So I've, in a way, never quite known, should I shy away from being more of a death-oriented show, even though that is like the core concept? Should I lean more into it? Does it matter? Am I overthinking about it? I don't know.
I mean, that could be an interesting discussion in and of itself.
Yeah, that's a tangent. Let's not.
While you're doing bonus episodes, it might be worth it to have somebody who thinks about death on your show.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody who's like a social worker.
Yeah. Works in hospice. Sure. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a death doula. There's a lot of death doulas.
Yeah. And I like that in the sort of bonus category. And I love the idea of branding segments. I do feel like there's opportunities for it. And once upon a time, we did have a sponsorship arrangement with a bookstore. I used bookstore. It was kind of a great one.
I feel like there's a lot of natural partnerships.
I mean, I'd be interested in hearing more about that. And, I don't know. I feel like we're coming up to time.
We're coming up on time, but quickly, I'll try to, even just coming up with, because the episodes are evergreen, you can go back to the Kobe episode and is there a youth basketball organization? Is there, and again, these can potentially be paid opportunities, or it can just be like, let me get in touch with this youth basketball organization and ask for some copy from them and tie it in because it's genuinely additive to both parties involved.
Yeah. There's a lot of that in the back catalog. A lot of the people we feature on the show had high net worth and have charitable relationships.
Another thing is in the high net worth section where you talk about the other, what is it called?
It's called net worth. And it's a category that it needs just more language around how we're describing the category.
Maybe it's just like, what are they worth?
Well, we do guess that, but it's also something where the sources we've been using are a little bit more questionable than I initially realized. Some of this was inspired by the Rewatchables podcast. They have a category called Half-Assed Internet Research Corner. This is kind of half-assed internet.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is. And
it's a nice excuse built in.
Right. If you title it Half-Assed, Internet Research, this is Half-Assed Internet Net Worth Research.
Yeah.
So I think it needs to be described as such, and we need to cite our sources on it.
Yeah. Or if you're thinking about things to cut, think about overall, what does that add to the conversation?
I think people are curious. I think the other thing is that we've created this like dinner table thing where who else landed with that net worth, imagining them all at a dinner table in the afterlife. That's the thing people seem to like the most.
Yeah. Let me just run through a few quick other ones. Okay. I was thinking about series. I was thinking about, if you in the future want to group your episodes together, could you do a 27 club?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of ways I've thought about. You could do it by fame. You could do it by.
I'm talking about like mini series in the future.
Yeah,
like you can say for the next 3 episodes we're focusing on the famous 27 club.
I've done that on other shows, and I've never been really confident that it's actually adding all that much value. I think it's sort of.
I think it's more of for the existing audience, maybe not so much, but it is an opportunity for you to put out a press release or to have a launch of something like, oh, we're launching a miniseries. That's the kind of thing. All you want to do in this life of being a podcast person is give people reasons to see novelty in your work, especially when you're an ongoing creator who's been making this forever and who will make this forever. And you need to come up with reasons for people to discover your show for the first time. So if that is something that attracts people, that's something to take advantage of.
That's a good point.
And
I don't know if it's
also on the playlist front, even just making a bunch of playlists on Spotify. So start here.
Yeah.
Here are the episodes that you should start with. Here are the episodes that deal with blank. Here are the episodes that are about music. And then those things become searchable.
Just put them out there.
Themselves.
Yeah, just put them out there. Make a bunch. How many episodes should go on a Spotify playlist? Does it matter? Do you have a theory?
It doesn't really matter.
Okay.
And then if you wanted to embed that on your site, you could use maybe Spotify, but you could also use Listen Notes, and embed the player. Yeah. There's a lot of options there.
That's smart.
Okay. One more thing before we go is explain the guest a bit more. If there's going to be a guest co-host.
Yeah.
So Sarah Murphy, you asked Sarah's connection. I liked her what she said about, her being an unremarkable basketball player. I thought that was funny. But how do you know Sarah? And why is Sarah a great guest host for this?
Yeah, that's excellent. That's something I've been thinking about a lot. And I honestly think that since Amit's had to step away, there's a sort of, the term I've been using is earned expertise of the show. I didn't come into this knowing anything special about pop culture or biographies or entertainment industry or anything like that. By virtue of having done 120 whatever episodes, I now do feel like a pop culture biographer expert. And I think I need to do more work to make sure my guest hosts are comfortable with a certain kind of, because the expertise of the show is not special knowledge. The expertise is the point of view, the orientation.
Yeah, it's talking about the special knowledge.
And how we're talking about like our interpretation. It's like we all get a chance to read this book that's a public book, but we can sit in a seminar class and have a unique interpretation of that book.
Yeah.
And I need to tee them up for that. It's really helpful. Okay.
Those are my notes.
This was awesome. I got so much out of it. Thank you. And I will make sure that everybody knows where to find you. You, madame, are a gem. And no, I mean, you and I think, share a lot in common in terms of our passion for the medium and what this industry could be. And thank you for carrying the torch. And thank you for making time for this.
Hell yeah. It's a pleasure from a learning perspective for me, figure out how you do things. And it's just fun to be able to listen to more podcasts with a critical lens because it allows me to expand my brain a bit. So thank you for doing what you do. And I hope you come back. And I can't wait for the launch and the new novelty.
Thanks, Arielle. Let's see you soon. All right, Michael Osborne here again. Just wanted to pop on once more to say thank you to Arielle Nissenblatt. You can check out her work. I highly recommend Earbuds Collective. I want to thank Jacob Weiss for helping to produce this episode. You can reach me as always at my email, michael@famousandgravy.com. I would love to hear from you. And I hope to have more for you soon. Until then, take care.